The truth is, you don't need tokens to win. In 2025, the Snap Pack system replaced the Spotlight caches and completely brought back what tokens were supposed to be for Marvel Snap. But what if you're free to play? Do you have to start spending? Honestly, no. You can build 0 token decks that focus on the Series 3 core and combat some of the flashier new Series 5, well, shiny objects. Today, I'm going to show you 3 0 token decks, why they work, why they counter consistently meta archetypes you'll see in Marvel Snap, and how to move your credits around as a free-to-play player using free-to-play math so that way you're never left behind. And as always, you know what to do. Hit like, subscribe. Let's get into it. The economy map. So you've got your Snap Pack system. These are larger pools of cards technically than we've ever really had before, but it's guaranteed to always have an unowned card. So no more of the duplication RNG hopes anymore. Now you can mix that with the new versions of Snap Packs. So you have your Series 5, your Series 4, even Series 3 Snap Packs that come with goodies alongside them to help boost you along your track. More importantly, there's a free Series 3 buy as well, and you can still then target exactly the card that you're looking for, especially if you're trying to build one of these 3 archetypes. Then you have your season track, and that's going to give you a bunch of your missions, a steady credit influx, and just kind of feels like the fuel to your free-to-play journey. So you take all of those, and it all results in wanting to progress using a strong currency flow value. Upgrade the cards that you actually use and also use in very specific cores, not just the random one-off cards, except to green border. That's okay. So first and foremost, let's dive into deck number 1, a Sera Control style of deck. And typically, the main engine of what we see with Sera Control is Sera, Shang-Chi, Enchantress, Killmonger, and Shadow King. From there, then you can start to build your deck a little bit more Series 3 friendly, not having to worry about, do I have to have Merlin and Gwenpool to make this engine work? You don't. Now, depending on the meta that you're in, obviously certain cards are going to be better than others. I've talked about it before, the strength of Shang-Chi versus the strength of Shadow King, and different metas define different uses for the card. But if you're building a Sera Control deck, you typically are going to end up running both anyway. So think about the decks that are going to be combat by this style of build. So you've got a couple of things, like, for example, you could splash in a Mobius if you see a bunch of Surge running around and Pixie running around and Ravonna and even Mr. Negative. They're all going to absolutely hate seeing that card, not just in this shell, but let's be honest, also in any shell. If you go down the seeing a lot of Mr. Negative, which I would not be surprised, especially towards the beginning of the season, but that's a different video. I'm going to say confidently, Enchantress is one of the most underrated base cards that comes and goes out of the meta only out of necessity, which feels weird because it's an incredibly strong card all the time in this deck. Maybe you throw in something like a Luke Cage because there's a bunch of affliction. I mean, we just had Omega Sentinel drop into the game, so we saw a lot of Cerebro 3. We saw a lot of Affliction also re-rise in the first week of this season. So I kind of feel that we're needing to look at Sera Tech a little bit differently and build a core engine around the idea of it is a counter deck first and foremost, but your game plan then needs to have pieces that get power within Series 3. When you're looking at cards, you can see it here. There's the Mysterio and Bishop synergy, which is incredibly accessible very early on in the game. Even throwing in something like a 2/6 Lizard, you have your own Enchantress. You can remove that downside by playing it in the same lane also. There are several different ways to take a Sera Tech style deck and have it be regularly combative within the meta, no matter what meta we're in, because you just make a tweak here or there, maybe use that flex spot one spot over, and all of a sudden you're right back in it with the big boys. So how are you basically trying to map the deck? What you're really trying to do is you're just trying to put stats on the board early on, typically turns 1 through 3-ish. Then turn 4 is a much more laid back play to kind of decide, Are you trying to grab the priority to do what you want to do on turn 6? Or are you trying to throw the priority to do what you got to do on turn 6? So that's how you're really trying to play your turn 4, turn 5, ideally the namesake of the deck. You're trying to drop Sera, and then afterwards you just go crazy. Whether you have priority and you destroy the things, for example, hitting a Black Panther on turn 6 before it can get Zolid is very different than hitting it and whiffing afterwards. So that's why turn 4 is incredibly important in a Sera Tech deck. But if Sera Tech is not the meta of the moment, if it's not the time for a reactive meta, then being a little bit more proactive with a destroy plan is a very solid way to go. And the archetype is very commonly defined, as you see on the screen right here. You almost always have Venom, Carnage, Null, and Killmonger specifically, Death almost all the time. And then you're kind of flexing from there. Which game plan do you want to go with? Are you doing an Arnim Zola Null style line? Is it a Nimrod deck that requires some extra reinforcement as well? That's where you get your flex pieces to kind of build in, and everything on this screen, with the exception of Agony and X23, is Series 3 and lower. This is such an accessible deck, and it is really easy to flex around in the metagame right in the beginning of the season in particular. That's when this deck is strongest. So right now, for example, in the meta at the time of recording, we're seeing a lot of move, we're seeing a lot of Victoria Hand, and this deck is able to help combat that by getting rid of a bunch of those demons that are all over the place, or the human, sorry, not the Human Torch, he's no longer the 1-cost card, it's Vulture now. I'm still trying to get, are you still trying to get used to that too? I feel like I am, and clearly, even in recording, I'm still not. Even the builds of Destroy that run Shang-Chi to help reinforce what that Null's gonna grow to on the final turn because maybe you cheated it out in some other mechanic. There are so many different ways to play this deck, and it's consistent. Sure, there are going to be those games where you don't get the draw, and there are going to be those games where they drop that Cosmo at the perfect time. Sure, it's going to happen. But the second you realize the patterns in this deck, you can run it at any given point and have it be at least competitive in any given meta. So typically what you're trying to do, and I just realized as I said that, there is a Nico on the board here. That's a Series 5, so ignore that one. But what you're trying to do, turns 1 and 2, get some base players down onto the board that you're going to destroy. Turns 3 and 4, let the destroys happen. Turns 5 and 6, let the chaos rain down onto the board afterwards. That's the whole game plan. Put them down, knock them down, show the results. But if you want to really push yourself into some complicated, rewarding decks, if you can master Move, you're a very dangerous Marvel Snap player, because Move is more difficult. I'm not going to lie about that. But it's also the deck that when you're starting the game and you're in Series 2, I often recommend it to many players because it helps you to truly understand sequencing. And if you get the sequencing down, you're ahead of quite a few players that have been probably playing for years even at that. So taking a strong deck like Move and build your core engine around, you know, Kraven and even multiple man. You can do it with Vulture, Dagger, Doctor Strange, and Cloak, and throw in the big boy Heimdall and slide everybody over. There's so many different ways to build a Move deck, and it's very flexible. Me personally, I'm less on the train of multiple man. I like having as many spaces on the board as possible. But if you're doing a build that benefits from also having Hulkbuster, for example, that's a pretty good build. So that's your flex piece, or that's more importantly, that's a synergy piece that will activate some other pieces as well. So how is this basically helping to combat against what's out in the meta? I mean, Scream can only take away so many points. And if you're ahead of it because you did a little move followed by a big move, sure, Scream can take that 2 power, that's fine. And when Scream's everywhere, sometimes you're pretty much in the A-OK lane. What's also fun about this deck is being able to push priority. So if you know they're playing a deck that's going to benefit from something like a Shadow King, it's very complicated, but it is more than doable to operate and pilot this deck around the threat of Shadow King. As much as Shadow King is a hard counter for targeting, If you master this deck, you'll always be a turn ahead and a step ahead to keep making their Shadow King whiff. What's also nice is, depending on the meta, sometimes we see a large cost reduction meta. You see it whether it's adding extra power, extra energy on the board with cards like Luna Snow, which gets popular all the time, or, you know, Sera decks become popular with extra reductions and try to minimize it down. You got a splat deck out of nowhere, and this one doesn't care. This deck is just, look, you can run your Mobius, that's fine. You do you. I'm just going to play my cards at their cost and not have to worry about it. So all you have to really do is just set up your Craven and your Dagger typically early on turns like 1 and 2, make some of the chaos start to happen on 3 and 4, and then by turn 5 at latest, you should be deciding, am I setting up for a big Heimdall move, or am I going to juke something out on in this? Either way, you know what's going on. More than likely, your opponent won't. Sera Control, destroy, and move. Very common archetypes, very often forgotten about, except this season that this video got released in, because we got Vision and Sparky and all of these chaos move cards. So people started to revisit move again. But what I really want you to get out of this video is remembering that you don't have to have the shiny toy. You don't have to have a Sparky to run a move deck. There are Series 3 variations of really good decks out there that you shouldn't feel pressured into leaning into the tokens and leaning into the gold to get the next card. If you want to take your time, take your time. No one's going to judge you for it. You may have to be a little leaner in regards to your targeting of what cards you want, what decks you're trying to build, and I'm hopefully going to be continuing to give you those resources to make that path a little bit easier as well. These are 3 very strong decks to combat any meta, especially in the beginning of the season. So I present you the same challenge I always present. Build one of these decks or modify one of your current decks to fit this structure. Try it for 20 games. Let me know down in the comments below how it actually went. I'd love to hear your feedback on this type of series as well, when we try to drop little nuggets of knowledge and just reminders to the community, whether you're a brand new player or returning player or someone just looking to change it up. Any kind of new information or just revival information I can present to you to give you a great Marvel Snap experience is my entire goal. So as always, for those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming. I'll see you next time.